Okay, cool. Yeah. So here is, we have all of our validation scripts in this repo here, but there's a whole bunch of them. And some of them are no longer used. A lot of them are updated for like recent updates to our environment setup, but some of them, and some of them haven't. You can see that. So these ones are probably more likely the ones we're using, but I'm not actually sure. These are both look like they're for a Mac. So what I recommend if you're trying to edit these scripts is to go where they're actually used and go from there. So I'm going to go into the phase 0 here. These scripts are being used for environment setup. So I should be able to click on this one and this one. And this command here, what it's doing, it's a curl command. So it's going to get the data from this URL. And then this pipe is used. The output of this curl command is then run by Zish. And this is just controlling the way it doesn't actually, I think dev null is controlling the way it outputs, or it doesn't store it for some reason. It doesn't log it, but it will output it. I think that's what it's for. Anyway, the main thing I was here for was just this. In this URL, the file we need to edit is at the end. So phase 0 validation script. And for Windows, it's going to be phase 0 manual setup validator. Okay, cool. I'm going to go back to this here. So it's this script and this script are the ones that are used for pre-work. So there's a bunch of stuff in here that like you don't really have to worry about. Like this stuff is all just styling for colors, for the output, for what the colors show up as on the terminal. But the way this sort of works, so there's a whole bunch of things in here. The main thing to really think about, to be focused on, are these sections here. So a lot of this is like these, you can see these are actually like, if you run the script, you see the bars of stars that show up. These are just the headers. So you ignore all that. These sections where there's a comment on each one are the actual tests. So this print table results will take in a string that's like the string, what the actual test is for the validator. And then this is the command that's going to be run for that test. So in this case, VS Code, for example, to check for VS Code, we run this command. And then we grep for a version number, in this case, for 1 point something, which would, if it's present, because grep, we learned in the mass updating content from last week, grep will just produce anything that finds that has like a particular string matching here. So what I can do usually when I'm editing this stuff or updating, like let's say, for instance, this particular line had an issue, you can run these commands, so just bash commands, and see what they do and see if there's something wrong with them. So let's see. So running this command v code, and then code v. Actually, these are two commands here. Let's see what this one does first. That doesn't do anything. Okay, this one actually may not actually be even useful to this test, because code v seems to be the only thing that's outputting, but code v still works, because if you remember from the grep here, we're looking for, trying to match a string in the output of this command that's 1 point something, which should match this here. So I think if I do code v and then grep 1 point that, yeah, so it actually did, it looks like it output both of these, which is a little odd, but 1.55, okay, cool. Yeah, so this seems to match both of these lines, which is probably not ideal. We want to be looking at this version. This is what this test is checking for. But you can see how this works, though, at least, that grep, given this string, is checking whatever the output of this is. And even though code v outputs more than that, grep will just like find the match. And grep -q, which is what the command is, doesn't output anything, but this actually returns in bash, it returns a true, like a true statement, basically a true value, as like it found this. If it finds it, it'll return true. If it doesn't, it'll return false. This is basically just the quiet version of grep without having to put output. So this command is going to basically running some bash checks to output some code. In this case, it's checking the version of VS Code and then looking for something in that output. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Cool. So there's a couple of things that will happen here that, let's see if I can find something that, I can also remember what has happened to students and if there's any issues that we're seeing. One thing that I know we have occasionally is like Chrome doesn't show up as being installed. And you can see that what this is checking, it's actually, this is also a bash specific setup. Bash has these square bracket blocks here. This is kind of like a conditional. It's and the dash F is actually an indicator. It's an option to say like, we're checking to see if a file exists. And in this case, we're passing in this path for Google Chrome. If this path is a file, then this whole block, square block, this whole block will become true. And so what this is checking for is check to see if this is true, this first block. And then if it is, go on just like regular conditional operations, then check the second condition here. So this one's like, okay, if it's true, then we'll go and check and see the contents of this, or the version of that file, looks like. And then grep to see if it says Google Chrome. So I can run this again. I'll run this in the terminals to test it out. That doesn't output anything because it actually should be just outputting true. You can write bash conditional statements. I'll show you how we can kind of test this line. If condition, then something. So we could write something like if this condition, semicolon, then we could echo hello. And then fi is the end of if statement. Let's see if this works. Hello. So this statement will now output that echo if this condition is true. So it's basically the same sort of, this was just sort of turned true. We just don't see it. The second part of this script, where was it? Is here. So this is actually calling the version flag on Chrome itself to run this. Okay, so that's working for me. I have a suspicion though that either students are installing this in the wrong location, or not necessarily the wrong location, just not in applications. I guess it would be good to check if a student sees like, I have Chrome installed, but it's not working. You can check and see if it's still in their downloads folder. Maybe it could be that it's just sitting somewhere and they can use it, but it's not here. And so this validation script's going to fail. So yeah, in this case, like I'm really not sure what the issue is here. This one, of course, it's working for me. Y'all can check it out on your own and see if it's working for all of you. But I'm not sure if we can take any action until we have a concrete example of like, maybe we could add an additional check here. We could do it if this is true, or another location if we find that students are storing it somewhere else, for instance. So yeah, that's pretty much how all of these work. You can see they're all grepping certain things. So here we're checking for GMP and UPG. And again, it's just like, it's actually this first part also may not be necessary really, but what we're doing here is listing all formula that are available in Homebrew and then grepping to see if GMP is in that list. And again, list all formula, check to see if UPG is in the list. This might actually, okay, this might explain what this first command does. This one, if I run the first half of this command, let's see what happens. Cool. So command dash V, and then giving it like a command, bash command. Let's see, like code. It will output, I see, the location of where that application is stored. So homebrew is stored here, VS Code is stored here. When I run those commands, or at least when those commands are stored there. So when I run that command, it looks here for what to do. When I run brew, it looks here for what to do. So I'm guessing that, and I'm not really sure, but that this is just going to return that, and this just suppresses the output. So if I run this, it won't show anything, I bet. What's going on here? Oh, double quote. Yeah, so this is probably returning a true or false statement, or basically it's returning this, but not outputting it, which is truthy. So yeah, here's like, this could probably, I'm not sure if this is actually enough, but it seems to be working for home. So at least it is returning true if students have Homebrew installed, so that's good. Here we can see a slightly more like flexible grep, where in this case, it's running NVM version default, and also the command vmvm. So I'm getting 15.12. It's just checking to see if V11, V12, V13, if any of these match the output of that command. In this case, V15 matches. So this particular command will be good as long as until Node gets to past version 20, and then it will start failing on students.
It looks like it's easy enough to just add V20 in there.
Yeah, you can just do V21 here and keep expanding it, and probably get rid of some of these maybe at some point. Yeah, for sure. Or maybe it's like, as long as this returns, well, I guess we want to make sure it's above a certain version. That's probably what we're checking here for. Yeah, above 11 or higher.
Got
So
it.
here's the kind of this is interesting. So this is one, actually, probably want to talk about this. We might want to just officially switch over to 2.7.2 for Ruby as our default installation. There doesn't seem to be any issues with it. We've had students switch over to it, like our M1 students are all on it, and there's no issues so far. But we do know that there are some issues with 2.6.1. So I think we might want to consider updating this and updating our instructions, which we could do right now, potentially, if you want. Trying to think what else I can show you about this, though, or any other questions y'all might have.
Yeah, I may have just missed it, but what was that resource you were using when you were setting up the if statement?
Oh, so I just searched like if a bash conditional statements, and this is the first thing that came up. But this is a good, certainly good one. It tells you all the flags. Like check. Oh, actually, these aren't all the flags, but yeah, this is like a standard if statement for bash.
Okay.
But the condition itself can be used independent of it and return, just like a parentheses on a Boolean in JavaScript. It'll return true or false.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so then I'm gonna stop